know if the virus came from inside the lab in Wuhan. And then on Sunday, you said there's enormous evidence the virus came from inside the lab.
Those are both true.
So did the intelligence change over the weekend?
Those statements are both true. They're entirely consistent. They're entirely consistent.
Why are you highlighting one and not the other?
I've now answered this question. I think it's the 13th time. Happy to try to answer it again. I'm not sure what it is about the grammar that you can't get. We don't have certainty, and there is significant evidence that this came from the laboratory. Those statements can both be true. I've made them both. Administration officials have made them. They're all true. But focus on the most important piece here. The most important piece here is that the American people remain at risk. The American people remain at risk because we do not know, to your point, we don't have certainty about whether it began in the lab or whether it began someplace else. There's an easy way to find out the answer to that.
Again, this is the man that stood on stage and screamed at the height of his lungs that he lied, cheated, and stole for a living. Mike Pompeo probably has less credibility than any other human being on this planet. In this reality or any other, nothing that comes out of Mike Pompeo's mouth should be believed on face value. Nothing. Not at all. If Mike Pompeo tells you it's raining outside, you better check the window. If Mike Pompeo tells you the sky is blue, again, check the window. If he tells you that the color blue is blue, again, look it up in a dictionary to make sure if you don't know for certain. Nothing that Mike Pompeo tells you should be taken as true. Now, Pompeo came out and said there was enormous evidence that the information or that the virus came from the Wuhan lab. Here's the catch. The more interesting part is at the very end, where Pompeo said the American public remains at risk. Remains at risk how? At this point, the virus is already ongoing. China and many of the other nations have been able to restrain the virus, whereas the United States has become the epicenter of this particular virus. If you want to check right now, the United States, 1,300, well, let's refresh. You can see it for yourself. 1,385,813 cases. When I checked this morning, it was much, much less. 18,175 new cases. 81,781 deaths. Now, if your name is Mike Pompeo and you're going to live in this idea of American exceptionalism, and you're working for an administration that is trying to work in the interests of the 1% and throw open the doors of the economy, what do you say? You go out and you tell the press that this is a horrendous case, this is horrible, China is responsible for this, and we need to have some kind of openness and transparency with China because the American people remain at risk. Basically, you get out there and lie, and you try to absolve yourself and the incompetence to which this administration displayed over the last several months and blame it all on China, especially in the context of opening the economy and trying to find somebody to point blame to for the deaths that are going to take place as you open the economy. Now, he's betting that he can blame China enough that the American public accepts China as being responsible for this. What he knows and what the Democratic Party knows is that the American public's perspective of China has degraded over the course of time and has plummeted during the time of the COVID-19 crisis. Initially, Americans blamed China for basically the companies moving over to China. That's not China's fault. That's American corporations' fault if you're going to blame anybody. Again, corporations are here to make a buck. They're not here to give you a job. If they can make 5 cents a nickel moving that job over to China, they will make a nickel moving that job over to China. It is their job. It is what they're philosophically there to do. They are a machine that can make profit. From the standpoint of the American worker, when you look at that, you may get pissed off at that, but understand that's what they're here for. There's a misnomer that the CEOs and the corporations are somehow benefits to America. Yes, there are benefits to America, but understand those benefits are tangential. They're secondary to the reason that they are in existence. It's very important to understand. It's not China's fault. That's my point. If you're going to blame anybody, blame the corporations itself, or hell, blame yourself for allowing policy and laws and people to be put in those positions that would allow this to take place. When the COVID-19 virus hit, that number plummeted that much further, as if China was somehow responsible for you and this country being affected by that. Missing the point that the United States had 3 months where it could have prepared and been ready for this particular virus, and that Trump, at no point within that 3 months, took drastic and severe action in order to lower not just the death toll, but to ensure that we had the supplies necessary in this country to deal with this pandemic. Trump is trying to throw open the doors of the economy, and he's trying to blame China for the death toll and loss of life that is going to take place in that process. From a polling standpoint, this, fortunately, it's not working. Donald Trump has utterly collapsed in the polling. Those reports where he flipped out basically are talking about the polls that I'm going to show you coming up. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. I'm not going to keep this video all that long. I've made points before to Donald Trump and what Donald Trump is doing and why Donald Trump is doing it and the gamble that he's making. Basically, if I had to guess, Donald Trump is thinking that because the majority of people who are being, disproportionate number of people being affected by this are African Americans, and because that's what's being reported more than anything else, I think he thinks he could somehow skate on this issue of blaming China. That's not working for a few reasons. Again, whites, 6 to 8% or so of this population, are dying in large numbers because of this virus. Whites are going to be infected more because of this virus. Regardless of what the messaging and regardless of what Fox News is saying, if you and your family members have been afflicted by the virus, which a large percentage of the population at the very least knows somebody that is, you are going to feel some kind of way about a policy of throwing open the economy. If 70% of the population says keep it closed, that is Democrats, Independents, and that's Republicans, and that's also a large share of whatever base Trump has. That base also has family members that are older. That base has family members that have some kind of other illness and that they can die, get sick, or that they can die or get sick due to this particular virus and due to the malfeasance of somebody else who's running around not necessarily caring, becomes a carrier, is not necessarily affected themselves, but is able to transplant it and pass it on to somebody else that will be greatly adversely affected. Trump, today at a press conference, to show you how rabid this is, where he is doing everything in his power to blame China, said this.
That the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
This president of the United States, this isn't working. He tells the Asian reporter about China. Now, to be fair, Trump would have probably said that to pretty much anybody, but it's very possible, knowing Trump, that he singled her out because she was Asian. Again, I don't necessarily know that. And again, I would make the point that Trump may actually say that to pretty much any reporter that would have asked them that particular question. But the point that, beyond the implicit racism of this, the whole point of blaming China is pretty astonishing. China, or virus, comes from China. Okay, fair enough. But the notion that the Chinese government was intentionally trying to push it is nonsense. I don't buy that. Nor is it possible it comes out of a lab. It's possible, but I don't necessarily understand why that matters one way or the other, nor does it have anything to do with Donald Trump's incompetence in trying to deal with this particular virus. We knew early on how bad this was. Those senators, they got the briefing from the Intelligence Committee. What did they do? They sold their stocks because they knew what was going to hit the United States. They may not have known how bad, but they knew it was going to be bad. 30 million people without a job, nearly 30 million people estimated to be without health care. We need to get across the scale of this. This goes back to the Great Depression era in regards to how bad this is, complete with modern day breadlines. Asking Trump about the deaths that have been taking place is a fair question, especially since his administration is taking a policy that knowingly is going to double that number. We are at over 80,000 deaths. That number is going to continue to go up. Mark my words, write this down for this particular video. As the economy opens up, the number will continue to go higher. And whereas us, if we stayed in the house for 2 or 3 months with the government ensuring 80% of our income and getting rid of rents and those type of things, we probably would have been able to open up the economy faster, as opposed to what will most likely be a lingering virus with larger numbers of people dying. The notion of herd immunity is not even part of the process, because apparently the different strains of the virus are active. One of the major strains that have been taking place in the European Union and in the United States was not the original strain. Meaning just because somebody was infected once, they can be infected again with a different strain of the virus. This is a very problematic situation that Donald Trump is engaged in. Now, the catch here is he is not getting away with this from the standpoint of his approval rating. This is Morning Consult, who's keeping track of presidential polling. All adults, this number, age 65 and over. Now, if you notice, just in March, Trump, one of his strongest constituencies is people who are elderly. Now, this makes sense. These are the Fox News viewers of the electorate. But notice what happens. Just for March, this number tanks. And not just tanks, this number goes below the all adults range, which if you notice, again, there was almost a 20-point difference, let's say a 15-point difference between these two numbers. And now these numbers have inverted. Why? Trump's handling of COVID-19. Think of the number of people who are in nursing homes that were dying as a result of Donald Trump's handling of this virus. Think of what was taking place in New York, where they had not necessarily mass graves, but they found all of those people in those trucks. Because again, so many people had been dying that the funeral homes couldn't necessarily keep up. If you know that the elderly population is explicitly susceptible to COVID-19, and your response as president is to open up the economy, you are basically putting a target on their backs with this particular virus, and you're not necessarily dealing with their issues. Their issue being, we want to live for the amount of time that we have left, and the policy that you're going by is going to interrupt that. Ergo, Trump loses approval. These are the largest declines in Trump's favorability from March to April. This is just 1 month. All Americans, 6 points decline. White mainline Protestant, 18-point decline. Battleground states, 15-point decline. Age 65 and older, 14-point decline. White without a college degree, 12-point decline. White Catholic, 12-point decline. White evangelical Protestant, 11-point decline. White women, 9-point decline. The problem that Trump is having here is that whereas Fauci was getting a 60% approval rating or more, 60 or more approval, Trump's truthfulness and approval from the way he was handling the virus was like at 40% or 30%. Joe Biden's is even less than that. So there's no real opposition from the standpoint of what the Democratic Party is putting up against Trump, which is, I would imagine, why Trump still has a chance with this. But this is not good. And if those numbers start to continue to increase, meaning the death toll, if this number continues to go up, and the public continues to blame Trump for this number to go up, those polling numbers, I would argue, I seriously suspect, will only continue to go down further. It's one thing if Trump shoots somebody on 3rd Avenue in New York. He's shooting somebody else. It's another thing when his own base is being afflicted by a virus and that they don't all that much agree with his policy of reopening the economy. Whereas the Republicans, I think it's like 50-something% say, yes, close it. The majority of the population, I think 70% say keep it shut. What's interesting is the disparity between Trump's base and between the rest of the country. Because Trump's base is more in line to say it's not as serious as people are making it. They're more inclined to disagree with the numbers. The wild part about it is the numbers are actually going to be higher by definition. They have to be higher. If you have a situation where you don't have enough test kits, then there's no way for you to know the exact number of people that is actually afflicted with the virus. So whatever this number is, the number is just by logically would have to be higher than what it is. But Trump's base doesn't necessarily believe that. His base believes that the number is lower. There is a disparity in the sense of Trump's base versus the rest of the country, but that disparity might be 30 or 40 points, but still the majority still say, keep it shut. Trump is not making and winning this argument. I'll end it here. I'm not going to keep it long. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all. Let me make sure. My internet went down for a bit, so that's the reason why it cut off and then cut back on.